Until I watched episode 3, I've been telling my friends, well, if I had friends, but if I did, I'd be telling them Doctor Who nowadays, it's like a good Doctor Who parody and should be approached as such. But then in the space of 1 week, it went from parody-level writing to unironically good despite flaws. My first words after watching Boom were, "Where was this Doctor for the last 3 episodes?" And the next week, episode 4 proved that wasn't just a fluke. So, what does this mean? Is it okay to like Doctor Who again? Or were the bad episodes so bad that they've lowered my expectations so now anything looks good? I don't know, but I've been burned before by thinking the show was about to get really good again, but... Oh, look what I'm doing. I'm going off topic again, because the good parts in episodes are really fun to watch and not so fun to talk about. And vice versa for the bad parts. But you know what? I'm feeling kind today. I do think it's worth talking about what made Boom so great. And it's from the moment he steps on that landmine, Ncuti Gatwa really sells you on his performance as the Doctor in a way that... No, I'm not even going to do the backhanded compliments this time. He just has that authoritative quality that pretty much every actor who's played the Doctor has embodied, with few exceptions. I would argue that John Hurt didn't have it, but that was in character. He wasn't the Doctor at that point. But the 15th Doctor has this commanding presence to really make you feel he's taking charge of the situation, even when his actual level of control is very limited. Like, I just really feel that Jodie Whittaker could not have carried this. I'm not saying because she's a woman, but only the most masculine of women could have carried this. See, I'm not sexist. Women are like my second favorite gender. Now, this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but it really isn't. I found Boom incredibly frustrating to watch. Just the characters, however well-intentioned they were, making a bad situation worse with every dumb decision that they make. It was the same frustration that I felt watching Midnight back in the day. And because I got the impression they were written that way, rather than unintentionally written that way, I felt every ounce of what frustration the Doctor must be feeling in that moment. And struggling not to move at the same time, it just... And finally, let's address the elephant in the room here. The stuff about capitalism and religion was obnoxious. But I think the story was just about good enough to earn its message. You have to tell a good story to earn your right to preach real-world politics. And it was also kind of funny to see Anglicans represented as these militaristic religious extremists when all of my Catholic friends have made it very clear that the Church of England is Christian in name only. And the villain mantra of thoughts and prayers, which Moffat explains his hatred of in great detail, feels like something he must have heard on the news and got mad about, which feels at least a little bit out of touch, as when you see the phrase thoughts and prayers used on social media, it's mostly just used ironically at this point. But these battlefield ambulances are incredible. The motive behind their creation ultimately comes second to them being a really evil and scary Doctor Who monster. Which is helped considerably by a little Moffat cliche, I suppose, which is the human voice that just from the things it says you can tell that something's wrong with it. And this was used to great effect here with both the ambulance robot's speech synthesis, but also with the captured data ghosts, I suppose you'd call them, if we're using the library episode's terminology. And this line at the end about faith, just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't need it. That Moffat essentially threw a bone to the religiously devout. I don't think the episode necessarily needs it. It was good enough already, but it was appreciated nonetheless. Finally, I said it was unironically good despite issues. So what are they? Well, these are things you don't notice while watching the episode, because until it's pointed out, you can kind of hold the two contradictory pieces of information in your mind, which are: the landmine will only explode when it confirms a valid target is standing on top of it, and second, the landmine will explode anyway after a certain amount of time has elapsed, because you learn these two pieces of information at two distinct parts of the episode. And when you hear that second one, you're kind of also thinking about that line earlier about how nobody can choke to death before they are safely shot, which was another brilliant line, by the way. But when you really stop to think about the episode as a whole, you start to wonder, if it was going to explode anyway, then why would it wait at all? Why wouldn't it just detonate immediately? I suppose so the episode can happen, but that weakens the story considerably. And another thing, this is more of a minor gripe, but no one else has pointed it out. When it was a plot point for at least the first half of the episode that the Doctor couldn't put his left foot down because it would shift his weight and he needed to pick up the flesh tube instead, and then he couldn't drop it for ages. But then you realize that he could have just put his left foot down on top of his right foot, so his right foot would still be carrying the same amount of weight as before. Or maybe just put both feet next to each other on top of the mine. One foot with a full 70-kilogram body weight on top of it has the same amount of force as 2 feet with 35 kilograms each. Science. Of course, it would depend a lot on whether the landmine detects pressure on any specific area, or whether it just detects force averaged out over its entire detection plate. I mean, I don't know how actual landmines detect things, I'm not that kind of autist, but I would guess that in this case it's fairly rudimentary. I mean, the progress of the LED ring seemed kind of inconsistent with what the Doctor was actually doing. Like, there were times when he expressed a strong emotion, but the ring didn't budge, and even though it had already been established that even just raising his blood pressure would set the thing off. Besides, if it was able to not detect a living being for that many minutes, then it's not very good, is it? A Palestinian child could design a better weapon than that, and probably has. And speaking of children, Splice was the worst, just the worst. It's not her actor's fault. It would have been too challenging a role to give to a 5-year-old, which I think is what she was meant to be. And one more thing about Villain Guard systems being dreadful, their central server and everything connected to it got hacked at the same moment by one of their own data ghosts. That would be like asking ChatGPT to take down the server that runs ChatGPT. Like, even if it agreed to do this, there's no way in hell that it would have access to those functions. Hacking just does not work that way. The only way you can hack something of that size and complexity is by typing really, really, really fast. But if you can suspend your disbelief through all of that, it's actually a really heartening moment that it's the power of fatherhood trapped in whatever humanity is left of the father guy, whose name, by the way, is literally father, in this data ghost that saves the Doctor and this entire planet. It doesn't hold together on every detail, but the themes come together really nicely at the end. And do you know what? It's episodes like this that really lend credence to a personal theory of mine that sci-fi and fantasy, really genre writing in general, is a kind of real-life magic. The type that is performed on stage with misdirection and sleight of hand in order to make you ignore the logical inconsistencies and keep you believing that the impossible is possible. We don't get caught up in how unrealistic this setup might be because the characters react in realistic ways If they can't do that, then they react in thematically appropriate ways, all of which is to engage us emotionally and distract us from thinking about it too deeply. And you know what? That's not a bad thing necessarily. Probably most, if not all, of your favorite episodes use theatrics like this one to make you ignore the parts that don't make sense. It's called suspending your disbelief. I've never heard of it described as a magic trick before, but I'm probably not the first to describe it this way. But there's nothing more embarrassing than a failed magic trick, as we shall see with episode 4. And then episode 5 is just a twatty magician who flips you off behind your back. I know you can't wait to find out why, so subscribe to this channel for God's sake! I might have already changed my mind about next episode in the course of making this video, but I'll be reviewing it soon either way. But the most important thing is to always remember and never forget to love with one heart and hate with the other. And if you disliked my last video, then you know what to do with this one.
No, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up. No, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.